Hello and welcome again to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. With me today is my co-host and founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we're very fortunate to have as our guest Professor Vassilis Fouskas of the University of East London. He's a professor of political economy and a prolific author. What we're going to talk about today is something that hasn't been given a lot of media coverage, but seems on the face of it to be a rather serious business, and that is the conflict developing in the Eastern Mediterranean between two NATO members, Greece and Turkey. We know the rough outlines of the story. There's a dispute between them as to the scale of their continental shelves. And they're both after the natural gas of the Eastern Mediterranean. But how is it got to the situation in which Turkey is actually now openly threatening war against Greece, and the EU is threatening sanctions and obviously even harsher measures against Turkey? So, Vassilis, could you just enlighten us as to what's going on here?
Yes, yes. It is a complicated story. But I would say if you would like one brief catchword to describe the situation, I would say it is the return. There is a new Eastern question here, if you see what I mean. I remember the Easter question. The Easter question was at the time, 19th and 20th century. It was a question of what you're going to do with the nationalities and the religious communities of the Ottoman Empire. The imperialist West didn't have a great plan about it. In the end, there were nationalities from within revolted against the Ottoman Empire. You had the Bulgarians, the Greeks were the first, the Serbs actually were the first, then the Greeks and the Bulgarians, and they start creating these little nation states, which they expanded to include the nationalities that were across the Ottoman Empire. The last phase of the Eastern Question was the Greek-Turkish War of 1919-1922, which presumably settled the Eastern Question once and for all, with the defeat of Greece in Asia Minor, actually the destruction of the Greek communities that were in Asia Minor for 2,000 years, really. They were pushed out of Asia Minor. There was an exchange of population, which Lausanne institutionalized by actually forcefully removing population across borders. So something like 400,000 Muslims left Greece and 1.4 million Greeks left Asia Minor. So you have a kind of Lausanne treaties, in fact, if you like if you want me to use modern parlance, is the institutionalization of ethnic cleansing. That's what it is about. But Greece, this helped Greece in a way because it got ethnic cohesion, and it helped Turkey presumably to settle in terms of ethnic cohesion, religious rather cohesion. But Turkey had a Kurdish issue, which is unresolved since then. But the return of Eastern Question is not a Greek-Turkish problem in a way. The return of Eastern Question has to do with structural issues that have to do with the post-Cold War order.
If I could jump in here, I mean,
yes, please, yes.
The issue here, I guess, for a lot of people in the West trying to understand this conflict, I'm glad you gave the broad historical background, but these are two countries inside of NATO, and and I think I can speak for George and most of the viewers of this podcast. I mean, NATO is irrelevant in 2020, okay, from a geostrategic point of view. Nonetheless, it is the cudgel that the U.S. uses to keep its footprint in Europe. And you have one country repeatedly going rogue, okay? I mean, I just checked the American conservative website minutes before we started our chat here, and I just typed in Turkey, and like 15 articles, throw Turkey out of NATO. So, I mean, the issue here is it's really the Turkish question, because we have Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, pitching one way to resolve this, and that's basically negotiations. And then you have the French President Macron saying we should send the French fleet to the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, even the European Union is at odds in how to deal with this problem, because Turkey is very emboldened. It has a very activist foreign policy right now.
Yeah, I agree with that, Peter. I don't disagree at all. What's happening is this is what I was getting at, effectively. Turkey has been emboldened and is very strong, both militarily and economically, despite what we hear recently in the press over the last year, collapse of the Turkish lira, economic crisis, and so on. Turkey is part of this, what we call, with my co-author Bülent Gökay, with whom I wrote 3 books together on the retreat of the American power from the globe. Turkey is part of what we can call a power shift process towards the east. China, the BRICS story, all this. India, Turkey is part of this regeneration of the new economic order after the end of the Cold War. So we have therefore a retreat of the American power from Eurasia, explicitly, if you like, Afghanistan, Iraq. If you remember, in Libya, America took a back seat in the bombing. It was France that sorted out Libya. Here's the conflict now with Turkey, between France and Turkey over Libya. So that is how I see the Eastern Question coming up, because America withdrawal and decline, economic decline, left a power void in the region. So that new actors like developing powers like Turkey, which is, an 83 million people, country of 83 million people.
Vassilis, Turkey is a sort of remarkable power in the sense that under Erdogan, it's managed to antagonize just about every power in the world. It has bad relations with Russia. There's a conflict between them over Syria, conflict in Libya. It has bad relations now with Egypt. They're on different sides, both in Libya and on this dispute with Greece and about the Eastern Mediterranean. Obviously, bad relations with Syria, but it has bad relations with the EU as a whole. Germany's a sort of quasi-ally, but only because Germany is worried about the migrant flow from Turkey. Turkey doesn't have good relations with the United States either, because the Trump administration didn't care for these purchases of these surface-to-air missiles from Russia. So how long can Erdogan go on antagonizing everybody and being rather isolated?
Yeah, it's good you ask these questions, because this is what is dominating the press. I can tell you this: Turkey has massive bargaining power.
Yes,
it finds a modus vivendi with the Russians. They've done the Idlib agreement. It's tactical. It's not strategic. It's not going to last for long. We all know it. But if something thinks, spring up again towards war, they will find another agreement and so on. Now, Erdogan managed to have engagements, military engagements, in northern Iraq, in northern Syria, in Libya, and guess what? These engagements are via mercenaries. No Turkish regular army is there. So they're not black bags with bodies of Turkish citizens going back to Turkey. They're mercenaries. Erdogan presents himself as a great ideologue, presents himself as the leader of the Muslim world. That's why there is a kind of a neo-Ottoman figure. And in that respect, also it reopens the Eastern Question, because you have Arab states against him. But at the same time, he makes deal with Hamas. And this enrages Israel.
It's very interesting when the Hagia Sophia, when they announced they would return it to a mosque, that is making a pitch for leadership in the Muslim world. And that's why, I mean, few people in the West can comprehend that. But it is very important here. Vassilis, one thing that I find really interesting, if we can just speak geopolitically here, I mean, Erdogan is, as far as I'm concerned, is a troublemaker, okay, in his neighborhood. But at the same time, you have to really marvel how a middle-sized power has been able to do what it has done. And one of the things is that it has, believe it or not, the cover of NATO membership, because that's always, Erdogan is always kind of taunting the NATO alliance. It's the second largest military in the alliance. It is geostrategically placed in the most important place in the alliance right now. You have to marvel at Turkey's, not Erdogan's necessarily, but at Turkey's ability to get what it wants with such limited resources. And of course, the economy is not good shape. COVID's there. The lira has been severely damaged, but it still has a very activist foreign policy. And it's something from, at least from an intellectual point of view, something to marvel.
Yeah. Yeah. What keeps Erdogan in power? Erdogan has managed to cleanse all the Kemalist generals from exile. There are hundreds of them in prison.
Can you explain? Can you explain to our audience the Kemalist ideology?
Well, yeah, the Kemalist ideology is, in one sentence, is a peace at home, peace in the world. We belong to the West. We are a secular state, etc., etc. More or less, this is what Kemalists are saying. That was a Kemalist establishment. It was a kind of militaristic regime, but it allowed, after the Second World War, the development of political parties and a certain form of democracy. Now Erdogan comes and gets rid of all this in a period of 10 to 12 years. It cleansed all its political enemies, including this clerk who lives in Gülen, the Gülenists, who lives in America. Yeah. Now, personally, I doubt the degree to which the Turkish army is really competent to fight against NATO countries, because lost many generals and many senior staff. I'm not sure the pilots are even good enough to deal with the Greek F-16 in dogfights they have. I'm not sure about that, but these are operational matters and I don't want to go into that. What the West is failing to do with Turkey is to raise the democracy question in Turkey. Who are the agents of democracy in Turkey? Who are the agents? The agents of democracy, believe it or not, are the Kurds. Not the Kurds that fight in the mountains and they want to kill people, but the democratic movement that they want their civil rights. The West and European powers forget about that.
Yeah, because civil rights and the democratic process gives them protections.
Exactly. But the West forgets about that and wants to make deals with Erdogan because they want to appease him, because they are scared that they're going to send 3 million refugees in Germany. That's what it's all about in the end. And people forget about that. The deal that was done...
You mentioned about the military of Turkey. Yeah. We haven't really seen the Erdogan throws his weight around, but we have yet to see any evidence of Turkey's military prowess. Not in Syria. So he keeps threatening that he's going to take on the Russians, he's going to take on the Greeks, he's going to take on the French. But
I think we got to keep an eye on the time here.
Military prowess.
We have to keep an eye on the time.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Yeah. Okay. Let's. I asked the question. Let's deal with that in the second part of our discussion. So, we'll now continue have a second part of discussion. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. Back very soon.